Imagine being the godfather to a man's son, the best man at his wedding, and married to his most powerful ally's sister, only to find yourself one day in a sniper's nest, waiting to gun that very same son down in the street. This isn't the plot of a Hollywood thriller, it is the true story of Gaspar DiGregorio, a man who held the hand of Joseph Bonanno at the altar and then tried to burn his entire family to the ground. His is a tale not just of ambition, but of a resentment so deep it cracked the foundation of the American Mafia and ignited a war that bore a deceptively silly name, the Bonanno War. To understand Gaspar DiGregorio, you have to go back to the beginning, to the hills of Castellammarese del Golfo in Sicily, where he was born in 1905. He was a product of that same rugged coast that produced the man who would define his life. In 1921, young Gaspar slipped into the United States through Canada, a common backdoor route for immigrants at the time, and planted his feet firmly in the bustling, violent streets of the Williamsburg neighborhood in Brooklyn. The 1920s were the golden age of the bootlegger, and DiGregorio dove headfirst into the trade. It was here, amidst the illicit flow of alcohol, that his path first crossed with Joseph Bonanno. They were two young men on the make, foot soldiers in a much larger game. That game exploded into all-out war at the end of the decade. The Castellammarese War, a bloody power struggle between the old guard Joe Masseria and the ambitious Salvatore Maranzano, tore through New York's underworld. DiGregorio, like Bonanno, sided with Maranzano. He wasn't just a bystander, he was a combatant in the conflict that would reshape the Mafia forever. When the war ended in 1931 with Masseria's death and Maranzano's victory, the victor reorganized the criminal underworld into the 5 families we know today. But Maranzano's reign was short-lived. He was murdered later that same year by a rising faction of young Turks led by Lucky Luciano. In the aftermath, at just 26 years old, Joseph Bonanno was made the boss of what became the Bonanno crime family, and Gaspar DiGregorio, his loyal compatriot from the war, was rewarded with his own crew and the rank of capo regime. For the next 3 decades, DiGregorio was the picture of a loyal soldier. He ran his rackets, kept the peace, and climbed the ladder. His life became inextricably linked with Bonanno's in a way that went far beyond crime. He married the sister of Stefano Magaddino, the powerful boss of Buffalo, cementing a powerful family alliance. When Joseph Bonanno got married, who did he choose as his best man? Gaspar DiGregorio. When Bonanno's first son, Salvatore Bill Bonanno, was born, who did he ask to be the child's godfather? Again, it was Gaspar. These were not just business relationships, they were sacred bonds of blood and honor, the very glue of the Sicilian Mafia. DiGregorio was not just a member of the family, he was, in every conceivable way, family. He naturally assumed that when the time came, he would be elevated to the position of consigliere, the counselor and third in command. It was his turn. He had earned it. Then came the betrayal. In the mid-1950s, Joseph Bonanno, in a move that shocked the old-school sensibilities of men like DiGregorio, appointed his own son, Bill, as consigliere. Bill was young, inexperienced, and American-born. To the mustached Petes like DiGregorio, it was a violation of everything they had fought for. It was nepotism over merit, and it was a slap in the face to a man who had bled for Bonanno. The resentment festered in DiGregorio's heart like an untreated wound. He remained silent, outwardly loyal, but the poison was spreading. The situation came to a head in the early 1960s. Joseph Bonanno, now one of the most powerful men in the country, grew tired of sharing power with the other bosses on the Mafia Commission. He devised a secret plan to have his rivals, Carlo Gambino, Tommy Lucchese, and even his own brother-in-law, Stefano Magaddino, assassinated. He recruited a young hitman named Joe Colombo to carry out the hits. But Colombo, terrified of the consequences, did the unthinkable. He went straight to the intended victims and revealed the entire plot. The commission was furious. Bonanno had signed his own death warrant. In October 1964, knowing the commission was coming for him, Joe Bonanno vanished. He staged his own kidnapping, going into hiding for over a year. Before he disappeared, he left instructions that his son, Bill, was to run the family in his absence. This was the moment DiGregorio had been waiting for. The insult of Bill's promotion was now a catastrophe. He saw a weak, inexperienced leader at the helm, and he knew the other families were enraged at the Bonannos. He made his move. DiGregorio went to the commission and presented himself as the solution. He was the respected elder, the man with the connections, the one who could restore order. The commission, desperate to break the Bonanno stranglehold, agreed. They officially deposed Joseph Bonanno and named Gaspar DiGregorio the new boss of the Bonanno family. It was a stunning validation, the pinnacle of a lifetime of work. He had finally gotten what he deserved. There was just one problem. Bill Bonanno and a large portion of the family refused to recognize him. The DiGregorio revolt had begun, and the media quickly dubbed the ensuing chaos the Banana War. The next few years were a nightmare of paranoia and bloodshed on the streets of New York. Loyalists on both sides were shot, and the city became a war zone. DiGregorio, now the boss, was tasked with crushing the rebellion. He had the commission's backing, but he couldn't seem to put away Bill. Then came the most infamous episode of the entire war, an event that would forever define DiGregorio's legacy. In late January 1966, DiGregorio reached out to Bill for a peace meeting. It was a classic mob tactic. Bill, perhaps longing for an end to the violence, agreed. He suggested a location, the home of his great-uncle on Troutman Street in Brooklyn. On the night of January 28th, Bill and his crew approached the dark, quiet house. What they didn't know was that DiGregorio and his men were already inside. They hadn't come to talk. They had come to kill. As Bill's car pulled up, the night erupted. From windows and doorways, DiGregorio's men opened fire with shotguns and pistols, a fusillade of lead tearing through the darkness. It was a massacre waiting to happen. Miraculously, in the chaos and confusion, Bill and his men managed to escape without a single scratch. No one was hit. The ambush had failed. This failure was a turning point. The botched hit made DiGregorio look inept. The war dragged on for 2 more bloody years, with neither side able to deliver a knockout blow. In 1968, DiGregorio himself was wounded by machine gun fire, and shortly after he suffered a heart attack. He was a soldier broken by the very war he had started. The commission, led by Carlo Gambino, watched the chaos with growing impatience. DiGregorio had been their hand-picked man, but he had failed to unite the family. He had proven to be a liability. Quietly, they withdrew their support and shifted it to another ambitious capo, Paul Sciacca. Gaspar DiGregorio, the man who had been the solution, was now the problem. He was shelved, stripped of his power, and cast out of the life he had given everything for. That same year, 1968, Joseph Bonanno, suffering from a heart attack himself, negotiated a peace. He agreed to retire permanently and move to Arizona. The war was finally over. But for DiGregorio, there was no triumphant return. He was a pariah, a man who had betrayed his best friend and lost everything in the process. He spent his final years out of the spotlight, living quietly with his family on Long Island, a ghost in the world he once ruled. On June 11, 1970, Gaspar DiGregorio died of lung cancer at St. John's Episcopal Hospital in Smithtown, New York. He was 64 years old. He was buried in St. Charles Cemetery in Farmingdale, a final resting place far from the violent glory he had sought. Gaspar DiGregorio's story is a timeless tragedy. He was a man who had everything, honor, family, and respect, and traded it all for a throne made of sand. He rose to the highest position in the American Mafia, but in the end, he was just a man who set his world on fire and got burned by the ashes. He wasn't killed by a rival's bullet, but the slow, quiet cancer of his own ambition. And that might be the most fitting end of all.